Did you know that there are foundations in every city and in every place? And those foundations aren't just physical, they're also spiritual. This is a little bit of what I saw during my accidental 7-week move to New York City. I would like to start this video by saying thank you to the French prefecture for helping me to align my New York travel so perfectly with this perfect 7-week delay. I was able to see quite a lot in New York City. I've heard it said that New York City was built on false and even occult foundations, and that magic and darkness have been wrapped into the very stones that lie beneath the city. And indeed, sometimes you can feel that sickly feeling in the metro far below the city. The New York subway system is more nerve-wracking than a simple, dangerous design. And that's because there have been dark things that have happened in New York. There have been dark partnerships that have been entered into in New York. But the reality of New York being built on false foundations, nothing could be further from the truth. New York City is set on a deeper set of stones than the occult paradigm could ever have replicated. The first time I first began to think about the foundations of New York was a couple weeks into my stay when I was walking through Central Park, and I kept feeling my attention being drawn to the stones in the middle of the park. And I began to hear this phrase in my mind, firmer foundations. And I started wondering how long those stones had been there. And I started even researching the origins of Central Park from the indigenous Americans who called it a land of bulls. So it's so like, but I couldn't find a big history. The only thing that I could locate was that it's like because we're going to be so far away, like New York was originally inhabited by the Lenape people, who were a group of people that did not believe in land ownership, among other things. And a lot of the knowledge of the original foundations of New York have been lost to history, or at least the history that a Google search can bring up. But to me, the rocks themselves are crying out, and they're telling a story of a much deeper placement than any deep or false foundation. But it wasn't until I started taking a walk through the financial district that I discovered something else. And in fact, I walked right over it. There was a scratched piece of glass laid over a cavern that looked deeply into the very foundations of the city, and the marker read, "The Foundations of New Amsterdam." And then a voice cut through my spirit. New Amsterdam was a city that was built on good foundations. And as I walked through the streets near Pearl Street, I began to think about the foundations of New York differently. As I walked through Pearl Street, I started to think about the foundations of New York differently. Pearl Street was called Pearl Street because when the Dutch landed in New York, they began to see that the street itself was lined with oyster shells because the indigenous Americans there were shucking so many oysters that you would crunch as you walked. So they called it Pearl Street. Pearl Street, to me, it's literally a gate of pearls that led into the city, which is a mirror of heaven itself. There is a picture everyone that has come into New York, whether they were the indigenous Americans, the original immigrants into New York, or even the ones that came through Ellis Island. New York is one of the major gates itself of the United States. And everyone that has stepped into and through New York has had to come in through gates in the city. And as they've come through these gates, they have walked into something that is literally a picture of heaven itself. Later on in my trip, I picked up a book in the New York Public Library that shared a little bit about this history in depth. The founders of New York spoke over 18 languages in a population of just 500 people. From the very beginning, the city has been a picture of one thing: every nation, every tribe, and every tongue. This city is a picture of what heaven is meant to look like. And finally, walking through some of the original buildings of New Amsterdam, I saw one of my first very large angelic principalities in New York. Angels come in types, and this one was an orb with eyes spinning in every direction. The wings of this angel covered eyes. It covered its eyes and it uncovered its eyes, and they darted in every direction, looking, searching, and watching. And frankly, it was one of those angelic encounters that was more on the alarming side, and it was over City Hall. And as I watched this, I heard in my spirit that this was placed here because of the founders who built these foundations. My sense is that this angelic principality has been placed to watch what happens here, to look over and to keep the words of what God has put for this city, because God has plans to restore New York to her original form. New Amsterdam is a picture of heaven built on a pearl street that is a pearl gate, not just into a city, but into a nation. Now you may be saying, Mary, like there's obviously so much darkness in New York. Da, 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 da. Darkness has always come and tried to spin its own narrative, but the narrative itself is actually what has empowered the darkness to remain. And it's time for there to be a new narrative that's spoken over New York, or should I say, New Amsterdam. Hey there, I'm Mary. I write and speak on the spiritual realm, but only with Jesus. If that interests you, I have some online communities that are really well suited for this sort of thing. And also, I have a handful of online resources, a online community where we step into engaging with the spiritual realm with peace. If that's something that interests you, come follow along.